Hello, everybody, and welcome into today's episode of Around the Slice. I know this podcast has been kind of MIA for like a little over a month now, give or take, but that is not because I haven't had the time or I have been busy doing other things. If you haven't heard already, I launched a second podcast slash show called the Around the Slice Fantasy Football Show. And I launched my own podcast network called Around the Slice Podcast Network, where you can find this podcast Around the Slice, which is mainly Bills focus. And then you can also find on the Around the Slice podcast network now the Around the Slice Fantasy Football Show. Both podcasts will be weekly. Obviously, they'll be a few days apart every week. I don't have like a set schedule, like every Monday is this show and every Wednesday and Thursday is this show. But just know, I promise, both shows, Around the Slice, this show, and the other show, Around the Slice Fantasy Football Show, will be weekly. So I promise you'll get that content once a week. But without further ado, I'm glad to be back on this show. And if you haven't heard my other show already, go support that. I'll talk more about where you can find that and stuff at the end of this podcast. But today on Around the Slice, obviously, this is like I've said many times, this is mainly a Bills-focused podcast. But since the Bills are in the AFC East, I like every summer, I like to take around this time, I like to take a look at the other AFC East teams and view our competition. How is their roster looking? How is their season outlook and all that, without diving too deep, just some baseline stuff, maybe diving deep later on. But I want to take a look at the offensive rosters of the AFC East. So I did this last year, so this is the second consecutive year of me doing this. I'm going to make this kind of a quote-unquote tradition, if you will. We're going to take a look at QB, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and offensive line, respectively, for all four of these teams. And I'm going to rank them on a scale of 1 to 5. So say if you have a 1 is a complete failure. Sorry to put it candidly, but 1 is a complete failure. 2 is below average. 3 is perfectly average. 4 is above average. 5 is excellent. You got an excellent room. And then anything in between that, like 4.25, like 4.75 is great. Like it fluctuates in between that as well. So first, and I'm not just going to say like the stars, like I'm going deep here and I'm going to say the room, because wide receiver isn't just your top 2 or 3 receivers. It's the room as a whole. Your running back isn't just the starting running back. It's the depth as well. Your quarterback is your backup quarterback. And sometimes in some cases, if I really like, your third string QB as well, so on and so forth. So let's just get into it. For QB, number 1, this is kind of obvious. I don't have to be a biased Bills fan to know this. Number 1 is Buffalo Bills. I give the room of Josh Allen and Mitch Trubisky a perfect 5. Now listen, when they released all those players, I remember the exact date, March 6, 2024, when they released Trey White, Jordan Poyer, Saran Neal. Well, that didn't really matter. Deontay Hardy, but you get the point. That same night, they signed Mitch Trubisky, and they were able to do it before free agency kicked off the very next week, officially, because he was cut by the Steelers a couple weeks prior, so he could sign wherever he wanted. And listen, they signed Mitch Trubisky to a 2-year and like a pretty modest deal for a backup QB. I said at the time, I still believe this, I'm not the biggest fan of Mitch Trubisky. His starting days are well over in the league. He had 3 years to prove that with the Bears, although not a very good situation, kind of an awful situation to be in. But nonetheless, his starting days are over. But I've come to terms with this, guys. I guess if I were to have a backup quarterback, and it's been a year-over-year rotation between Case Keenum, Matt Barkley on 2 or 3 different stints, Jake Fromm during the COVID year, Kyle Allen, who was god-awful. Sorry, but he was god-awful in preseason last year. Out of that quote-unquote rotation of backup QBs over the last 3 or 4 years, I'm glad that Mitch Trubisky at least is a familiar name from 2021. So Brandon Beane, obviously, he's a great friends with Josh Allen, and he has a relationship with Josh Allen that plays a huge part. But Brandon Beane likes the continuity, and bringing him back 2 or 3 years later is really good, I guess. So I've come to terms with it. It is what it is. Hopefully, he only gets in games when the Bills are up like 20 plus in the fourth quarter, and Josh Allen throwing 4 or 5 touchdowns, maybe a rushing touchdown or 2 in there as well, and he only has to come in fourth quarter. I'm going to give it the perfect 5. Like, people that say Josh Allen's going to quote unquote regress this season just because Stefon Diggs is gone is ridiculous to me. I've said this multiple times. Guys, we're not. Well, I'll get this more into the wide receiver because I don't want to spoil my thoughts, but just know that I think that narrative of Josh Allen, quote unquote, regressing is stupid and a false narrative out there. So I'm giving this a perfect 5. I will say, though, Josh Allen needs to cut down on those touchdowns. Not cut down on touchdowns. He probably can get over 30 again and spread the ball out more. But he needs to cut down those interceptions. That's what I was looking for. He needs to cut down those interceptions and fumbles and turnovers. Like, we can't have 4 turnovers total. So 3 interceptions, 1 fumble lost. So 4 total turnovers in week 1 against the Jets. Like, week 1 against the Cardinals, if you lose that game, that's a catastrophe. Just looking at the rest of the schedule. But I digress. Whatever. Giving that a perfect 5 with the duo, if you will, of Josh Allen and Mr. Busy, the backup, which is whatever. 2, the Jets. I'll say the rating in a minute, but starter is actually Aaron Rodgers, coming off a torn Achilles at 40 years old, which he'll be 41 in December. So this is like, for the most part, it's age 40 season, we'll call it. I don't think people are talking about this enough. I kind of like to tease this. I kind of talked about this on the Around the Slice Fantasy Football show last week. Go check out that full episode. But I was like, for real football and NFL, or for real football, NFL football, and fantasy, that show, whatever. But for real football purposes, for this show right here Around the Slice, it's the East landscape at least, I don't think people are talking enough about, are we just airdropping Aaron Rodgers back into this offense at 40 years old, turning 41 in December, like coming off a torn Achilles? That's not some easy thing. And I know Aaron Rodgers, other than breaking his collarbone in 2017, which that was like 6 or 7 years ago by now, but so he's over that. But I know he's been pretty healthy, but now he's gonna about to turn 41 years old. I'll be shocked if he plays this past season. I know he says he wants to, but I don't know. Anyway, so, and then your backup is Tyrod Taylor. I actually really, really like that. Tyrod Taylor doesn't have the legs he used to. Like, he was the Bills starting quarterback from 2015 to 2017. So for those 3 years, I'm not exaggerating here, he was one of the very best runners in the game, up there with Russell Wilson, and him and Russell Wilson have both lost their mobility here. But Tyrod Taylor can kind of still sling it if you want. He has an underrated deep ball. He's very accurate. He doesn't turn the ball over. His problem in Buffalo all those years back for that 3-year stretch was because he couldn't see over his own offensive line. Sorry, but he's only, 6 foot, 6'1". That's why he was so mobile, though. But I really like, there's no ceiling to Tyrod Taylor. Like, he's 35 years old. I think 35. He's 35 years old at this point in his career. He's only got a few more years left, and he's a career backup at this point. He really only started consistently for those 3 years in Buffalo, which, again, he was not pretty good, but he was serviceable. He got them in the playoffs that 1 year and broke the 18-year drought, but that's going to be here and there, whatever. That's years ago. Tyrod Taylor provides a floor that this team did not have last year with the carousel, and it's a bad carousel, guys. The carousel rotation last year of Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle, Trevor Siemian, Mike White 2 and 3 years ago, respectively. 2 or 3 years ago, excuse me, I should say, rather, respectively. So Tyrod Taylor provides a nice floor as this backup. If Aaron Rodgers were to get injured again, or if he has any trouble coming back, I think Tyrod Taylor is a very capable backup QB who can spot start for you, and sometimes, if you want, who can get you to 7 or 8 wins. Just know he's not going to have a high ceiling. And then third QB, whether he starts an IR or PUP or not, Jordan Travis. He's probably never going to get playing time this season, but I really like him as a future stash, because I know this is like a long shot. The odds are stacked against him here, very thin, as they say in batting, whatever. I think Jordan Travis could be a very good developmental third-string quarterback. Don't put him in the practice squad. He'll get poached right away. But I think, excuse me, I think he can be a very good developmental QB. And could he be their starters? Could he be the Jets starter, in 2 or 3 years' time? I think he absolutely could. I really liked him at Florida State. If he didn't break his leg, I know the whole Florida State missing the playoff controversy, but if he didn't break his leg, I think Florida State would have been in, because the College Football Playoff Committee kind of determined, like, look, this isn't going to be a fair matchup if you put Florida State in. I don't know the merits of that, but still, I think Jordan Travis could develop into a really nice starting QB in 2 or 3 years. Aaron Rodgers, I think, will be long gone by then. Tyrod Taylor's only really a 1-year rental as a backup QB. they probably still have to draft a franchise QB in the next 2 or 3 years. But Jordan Travis, like sneaky. I'm not saying he'll be a franchise QB, but could he be a starter for the Jets for a 2-year stretch in like 2 or 3 years? I think it's very possible. I'm not banking on it happening, but I think it's possible and people aren't talking about it enough. I'm going to give this Jets group of Aaron Rodgers, Tyrod Taylor as a high floor backup, and you know what you're getting. And then Jordan Travis, like I said, sneaky, maybe franchise QB in 2 or 3 years. I'm going to give this a group of 4. If this was Aaron Rodgers, like hell, even 3 or 4 years ago, like his last year in Green Bay, it was just mediocre, maybe slightly above average. But if this was Aaron Rodgers 2 or 3 years ago, or 3 or 4 years ago, excuse me, when he was winning, he won back-to-back MVPs in 2020 and 2021 respectively. This would be a perfect 5. I'm not kidding you, because I like the makeup of this room. But I'm going to give this a 4 because it's not Aaron Rodgers 3 or 4 years ago. It's 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers turning 41 in December, coming off of a torn Achilles, probably his last year in the league. But I will give this a 4. Everything about the Jets is, as you'll see, in the offensive roster grade at the end. And then when we do defense next week, I didn't realize this. The Jets roster is pretty stacked, guys. It all just depends on the O-line kind of gelling together and Aaron Rodgers kind of, bouncing back, if you will, from his torn Achilles. Next, I'm going to give I'll say the guys and then the rating. The Miami Dolphins QB room is at a 3. 2 is your starter, and then your backup is Mike White, and then I guess your third string quarterback is Skylar Thompson. I know Mike White had a quote-unquote insanity run in 2021 and then again in 2022. The more you look back on it, guys, it was no run. It was one good game in 2021 and then one good game in 2022. And the stretch after that, he was kind of awful. I think people got too hyped. I'm going to give this room a 3.25, and maybe I'm kind of hating on Tua here and not giving Tua enough credit, but it's the same thing with the Dolphins every year, and in this case, Tua Tagovailoa specifically, because September and October, we hear all the jokes. Oh my God, the Dolphins are the greatest show on turf. They scored 70 points last week in week 3 against last year in week 3 against the Broncos. Greatest show on turf. Yeah. Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, everyone there. The whole gang's there. Greatest show on turf. Whatever. And then November, December, January, fall apart. Tua does not have those big marquee moments like Lamar Jackson, as much as I think he's kind of overrated too because of his rushing ability. Lamar Jackson has 2 MVPs. Joe Burrow's been to a Super Bowl and is an MVP caliber player who just can't stay off of avoid injury, unfortunately. Aaron Rodgers, very decorated career. So I think he's kind of the middling tier of the AFC in terms of stacking the quarterbacks up. So maybe I'm not giving Tua enough credit here, but he has no marquee moments in the playoffs. I know he's 0-1. He didn't get much opportunities, but he's kind of have a fragile frame. He has the concussion he's used, and I'm not making fun of him because of that. Those are serious issues, but I don't know. That hasn't happened in 2 years. Just looking at his play, September, October, phenomenal. Greatest show on surf, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. And then November, December, even into January in the playoffs, totally cracks, totally falls apart. So the group of Tua Tagovailoa, Mike White, and then Skylar Thompson is your main backups. QB3 for Skylar Thompson, I should say. I'm going to give this a 3.25. And again, looking back on this after next season, maybe I'm not giving Tua enough credit. I know he hasn't gotten a contract extension yet, but come training camp, come early to mid-July, right before training camps start around the country at the end of July, I'll probably have an extension, probably be overpaid though. I'll react to it on this podcast because it's AFC East related and Bills related, obviously. But yeah, Dolphins QB room gets a 3.25 from me personally. And then the Patriots, they're obviously last. I'm going to give them a 3, perfectly average. I started out this exercise giving them a 2.75. But I'm going to bump it up a tad to a 3 because Jacoby Brissett provides a nice floor. And whenever Jacoby Brissett has been a stand-in starter, whether it's spot starting for a stretch of games, a few games, 3, 4, 5 games here and there, a full year when Andrew Luck retired and he immediately had to start for the year as a bridge QB for the Colts until they went through the whole Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers experiment, which was awful. 3 or 4 years of the Colts. Yeah. He's been pretty good. And then whether it's been stepping in for Tua because of those concussions or just because Tua's early in his career, that sucked, but you get the point. Wasn't very good. I like Jacoby Brissett. He provides a nice floor, and I like the upside and potential of Drake May. It's just not enough to put it above average 3. And then it's a QB3 and QB4 situations. Bailey Zappi and Joe Milton, they'll be battling out for QB3, and maybe the QB3's on the practice squad or whatever. I think Joe Milton should move to tight end, but he said the Patriots told him they drafted him in the pre-draft meetings and the draft call specifically on day 3 that Saturday that they want to keep him at QB. I don't think that's smart. He could be a chess piece for a mismatch for defenses at tight end because he's huge. He's like 6'5", 235 pounds. Put on 10 or 15 more pounds, there's your tight end. But yeah, I'm going to give this a 3. The group of Brissett, May, and then whatever Bailey Zappi and Joe Milton is a day 3 pick. Both of them. I'm going to give this 3. Perfectly middle of the line, average. This could be maybe if Drake May takes the world by storm, which I don't think he will, because I really, really love Drake May, but the surrounding pieces just are not there. As you'll see when we continue with other positions, maybe this can be notched up a little next year in the 3rd annual when we do here on the Around the Slice podcast. But yeah. Next, running backs. New York Jets. I'm going to give this a 4.25. I started at 4, but the more and more I think about this, I really love Breece Hall. I know he's a Jets player, so I shouldn't love anybody on the Jets, but they don't annoy me as much as the Dolphins and Patriots. Their fan base is kind of quiet, which not much to root for over there. But we'll get to that then. I really love Breece Hall. Like coming off a torn ACL last year, he didn't lose a step. I know he didn't have 1,000 rushing yards last year, but what? He had 950 something. That's incredible for behind an O-line that was always injured, always played below average, couldn't gel. And then Aaron Rodgers was injured as well. The QB rotation of, I said earlier, Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian, Tim Boyle. Yeah, like Breece Hall was off to a historic rookie season. For towards ACL, unfortunately, in mid-October there after 7 or 8 games, unfortunately. So yeah, really love Breece Hall though. If the depth was better here, like the depth after Breece Hall is Izzy Abanikanda, Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis, who they drafted this past year. Really like the Braylon Allen pick, by the way. Isaiah Davis, not so much. And then Tariq Cohen, which probably won't make the roster. Hasn't played since 2020 with the Bears, now with the Panthers, got injured again. It's just an unfortunate story. And as small as it is, doesn't bode well. I would really love the depth even more. Like Jerick McKinnon's out there. Like go sign Jerick McKinnon. Go sign Jerick McKinnon. He's a nice RB2/3, mainly RB3 at this point. His career, he's 32 years old. Yeah, he's 32 years old. So he's a pass catcher though. He's a really, really good red zone threat out of the backfield and end zone threat, if you want to frame it. So if this running back room was, let's say, Breece Hall, Jerick McKinnon, and Braylon Allen, and Isaiah Davis in the practice squad, but mainly Breece Hall, Jerick McKinnon, and Braylon Allen. This might be a 5, at the very least a 4.75, but I'm going to give it a 4.25 right now because I'm in love with Breece Hall and his running style, and his pass-catching chops are elite too. He takes massive workloads in his career already. I just question the depth a little behind this, but I'm going to give it a 4.25. Breece Hall is really carrying the load there, literally and figuratively. Next, 2 in terms of running back room, Miami Dolphins. I'm going to give this a 3.75. The room is Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane, Jalen Waddle, and Jeff Wilson. Listen, Jeff Wilson is their RB4 here. Probably won't even make the team, whether he's cut or traded, whatever. He could realistically and feasibly be a lot of teams in the league actually RB2. And then Devon Achane. I know people are saying, well, the drafting of Jalen Wright will kind of cap Devon Achane only 10 to 15 touches a game. Well, that's really what he was only getting last year with his tiny frame, unfortunately. But more and more I think about Jalen Wright, he's a big, fast running back, which Devon Achane's a small, fast running back. But I think Jalen Wright's the more the Raheem Mostert replacement for the next year or so, rather after the season, I'm saying, for the next 2 or 3 years, or a year or so, whatever, than Devon Achane, because their frames are totally different. But Raheem Mostert, to give him credit, it's the first time he's played more than 12, 13 games his whole career, more than 10 even. So he had 18 touchdowns. He's not going to happen again. I don't want to say that's a fluke, but I don't think it will happen again. And then let's see here. And then I really like the depth of this room too. And the starters, whether it's Raheem Mostert or Devon Achane as the starter, and then Jalen Wright kind of sitting on ice for a year. Not on ice, but maybe not an impact in year 1 as a rookie. And then Jeff Wilson, I think, like, if you're the Cowboys, if you're the Chargers, call the Dolphins about Jeff Wilson. Give them a late day 3 pick, 6th or 7th round pick. I would even give a 5th round pick for Jeff Wilson. I'm going to give this room a 3.75, though. I love Devon Achane, but it was just 1 year. Raheem Mostert, unfortunately, probably won't stay healthy again like that. But, and then Jalen Wright, I really like as the future Raheem Mostert replacement. And then Jeff Wilson, a tradable piece there, but still, like I said it before, a lot of teams RB2. He's the Dolphins' projected RB4 right now, and I don't think that's going to change. So I'm going to give this a 3.75. Next year, if everyone stays healthy, like say Raheem Mostert has double-digit touchdowns again, and then Devon Achane, only 10 to 15 touches a game between rushing and receiving combined, goes off for 1,000 yards and 10 to 15 touchdowns again, and then Jalen Wright shows something as a rookie. If you're able to get a day 3 pick for Jeff Wilson, this could be pushing a 5 next year, and I'm not even kidding. But for right now, I'm giving this a 3.75. 3 Bills. I got a 3.5, right in the middle, above average, slightly above average, maybe almost great, but 3.5 because I really love James Cook. The depth here, though, is kind of lacking. I don't think they have pass protection in their DNA here, if you will, in the running back room, because behind James Cook is Ty Johnson. He's okay at pass protection, and then Ray Davis. He has the build to be a really good pass protector in the league. That's gonna take 2 or 3 years because he kind of dives at the feet of defenders a little too much when he is in pass pro for pass protection. As much as I think, and we all thought that, me personally thought that Latavius Murray broke down last year. The reason why he got on the field so much, as much as it frustrated me personally, was in all Bills Mafia, really, for that matter, was because he was amazing in pass protection. The guy's 6'3", 230 pounds, like amazing in pass pro, amazing in pass protection. They're kind of lacking that right now, but I'll give this a 3.5. James Cook is really carrying the load here. And then whoever your RB2 says 3 is between Ty Johnson, James, and Ray Davis, but this team obviously covets, and they're all 3 are really good receiving backs too. And then Ty Johnson gives you a little bit of everything, kind of blocking in the edges. He's okay as a run blocker and pass blocker. He runs outside zone, inside zone, between the tackles, receiving ability. And then Ray Davis is a really good screen merchant, if you will. I know people love that term for college running backs coming in the NFL, screen merchant, if you will. This team just doesn't use screens much. We can dive into that in a future episode in their playbook and stuff. But I'm going to give it to 3.5. James Hook and then Ty Johnson and Ray Davis are okay. They're just lacking in pass pro and pass protection. 4, New England Patriots. I'm going to give it a tick below the Bills because 3.25. Their starter is obviously Ramondre Stevenson. They gave him, 4 years? 9, 18. 4 years, $36 million the other day. $9 million per year. That's probably a couple million per few to a couple million per year too much. AAV, excuse me. In terms of annually, he's probably worth 5 to 7. I'll say he's probably worth 6 to 7 million a year annually, but they gave him 9. And behind him, I don't really know, guys. Like Antonio Gibson, what is he at this point? He says he wants to play more slot receiver, like he did in Memphis when Tony Pollard was there as well. But then he says he's a running back. I don't know what he is at this point. I've just kind of given up. I liked him coming in, but after going into year 5 in the league, like, come on. And then Kevin Harris is kind of a below average RB3. And then JaMychal Hasty is like a practice squad caliber RB4. I just included him for the heck of it to round out the room. But I really like Ramondre Stevenson. I know he hasn't exploded like Bynum do, but he's a big bruising back. Like, you want a guy to get you tough, short yardage, goal line back, Ramondre's right there. And then behind him, it's lacking depth. So I'll give this a 3.25 because I think like Antonio Gibson is kind of comparable to the combination of for the Bills, Ty Johnson and Ray Davis. That's why their scores are so similar. I just think Ramondre Stevenson is a tick below James Cook at this point. He's not nearly a dynamic receiving back. He can catch the ball just fine, but when it's in his hands, he's not really dynamic with it. And he doesn't get targeted much anyway, even though he can, in his skill set, his repertoire, if you will. So 3.25 for this Patriots room. Wide receiver. I'm gonna give this pains me to say, but the Dolphins number one by far, like have a perfect 5 receiving room. Like obviously your 1-2 punch is Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle at the top, but OBJ is their wide receiver 3. Odell Beckham Jr. is their wide receiver 3, and like that's perfectly fine as a wide receiver 3/4 for Odell. Because if OBJ was really once Mark Andrews went down, even with Mark Andrews in there because he's a tight end, he was the Ravens wide receiver 2 all season behind Zay Flowers, especially when Zay Flowers broke out. Like, and at this point in his career, he's 31 years old, or he's going to be 31 very soon. I think in November he'll be 31, but let's just say he's 31. He's 31 years old. I think he's a perfectly fine wide receiver 3/4 in his career. No more really athleticism anymore. Separation skills are kind of gone. He had that nice 2 or 3 year stretch in New York, but ever since then he's been kind of in Cleveland. In the Rams, he kind of had a resurgence before he tore his ACL in the Super Bowl, and then 2 years in a row. First in Cleveland with the Browns, and then Los Angeles with the Rams. But that's besides the point. And then your wide receiver 4, 5, and 6 to run out this room: Malik Washington, and then Taj Washington, and then Braxton Berrios, who is a return specialist only. I really like the drafting of Malik Washington and Taj Washington. You don't have to roll out these guys like Chosen Anderson anymore as your wide receiver 3 and 4. River Craycraft, Braxton Berrios. Like, yeah, Braxton Berrios is still a returner, but preferably he's only a slot specialist and returner. So I really like how they, unfortunately, pains me to say, but I really like how they round out this room. They got star power and they got depth, and they drafted really 2 young, nice receivers with the Malik Washington out of University of Virginia, and then Taj Washington, who played with Caleb Williams at USC out of USC, and then Braxton Berrios, whatever, is a return specialist, slot specialist. And then number 2, Jets, 3.75. I will give Mike Williams a little bit of credit here, but it's Garrett Wilson. I will admit he's kind of carrying this group. And then Mike Williams, Allen Lazard, Malachi Corley, Xavier Gibson, and Malik Taylor as a wide receiver 6. Garrett Wilson, superstar. The numbers he's been able to put up with, because he hasn't played with Aaron Rodgers yet. Like, Aaron Rodgers didn't attempt to pass 4 plays in. He tore his Achilles. So, but the numbers that this dude, Garrett Wilson, has been able to put up with Mike White, the carousel, Mike White, Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle, and Trevor Siemian is just absurd. Like, if he had an actual good quarterback, like what he does this year in Aaron Rodgers, I think he could push for 1,500 yards and like 10 or 11 touchdowns. Like, he's a monster red zone threat. And then Mike Williams, maybe I'm not giving him enough credit here, but if you could paint me a picture, and not paint me a picture, if you could promise me 16 or 17, let's say 17, if you could, because that's the season long, if you could promise me 17 perfectly healthy games and 17 games of perfect health from Mike Williams all year, then I would really like it. This might be a 4.5. This might be a 4.25 at the very least, even. I don't think it would get above that in terms of rating, but he's just, like, it's not a matter of if he'll get injured, it's when he gets injured. Like, the guy just tears his ACL every year, and it's unfortunate. Is it going to be early in the season, mid-season, late season when they need him for that playoff push? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. So it's really interesting to me. Maybe I'm not giving him enough credit, but he can't stay healthy to save his life, unfortunately. And then Allen Lazard as a quote-unquote wide receiver 3. I don't care about Allen Lazard. I think this is the consensus. Yeah, apparently he was on the trade walk around free agency earlier this year in March. Who the hell is trading for Allen Lazard? I'm sorry, some harsh guys, but like, come on. He's only there because Aaron Rodgers was there. He brought him over from Green Bay to make him happy. To Robert Saleh and mainly Joe Douglas, the GM, wanted to make Aaron Rodgers happy. But they gave Allen Lazard 4 years. This is just an absurd contract to me, but 4 years, $44 million, $11 million per year. And once Aaron Rodgers got injured, they just didn't care about Allen Lazard anymore. Why? Because he's an Aaron Rodgers guy. So they gave him 4 years, $44 million, Allen Lazard, that is. And he's a healthy scratch towards the end of the year. Like, Xavier Gibson getting playing time over him. Like, Jason Brownlee's getting playing time over him. And then Allen Lazard is a healthy scratch towards the end of the season, last handful of games, 2 or 3 games here and there. He's a healthy scratch. I don't care about him. I think Malachi Corley is going to usurp him, if you will, pretty quickly. And I think because of that, Malachi Corley could get on the field, maybe not much earlier, but earlier than what the consensus is thinking right now. And we're thinking, because I like Malachi Corley. He's awesome at screens, and he's awesome at run after catch. Like, he's literally like a I know people always say there's always like a running back with the ball in his hands. He literally is. Like he'll just bounce off defenders, he'll juke you out, juke you left and right. He's just got to improve at everything else as a downfield threat, as a route running. But I think he could usurp Allen Lazard and get in the field much earlier than we're thinking. And then let's see here. Oh, sorry, I lost it in my phone. And then Xavier Gibson is kind of a lesser version coming out in a year or two of in terms of lesser version of Malachi Corley. Like he's a slot presence, and then I think he could get playing time over Allen Lazard too. And in fact, since Allen Lazard was a healthy scratch for the last handful of games last year, he did get playing time over him. That's how much Allen Lazard means nothing. If Aaron Rodgers isn't there, he would literally be cut or traded by now. They would gladly eat the money, in my opinion. And then Malik Taylor is wide receiver 6, healthy scratch most weeks probably this year, but he provides a nice size element that the Jets don't really have. They have a lot of shifty, speedy guys in Malachi Corley and Xavier Gibson, and I don't care about Allen Lazard. I keep saying that, but I really don't. And Mike Williams is a big-bodied threat, but when is he ever healthy? It's unfortunate, but so Malik Taylor provides a nice, hefty size red zone threat. So I'm going to give this group a 3.75, but again, if you promise me 17 healthy games of a full season of perfect health from Mike Williams, this could be a 4.25 at the very least. I'd really like it a lot more. And if Allen Lazard wasn't in this group and they drafted a receiver high, I would like it a lot more too. And then Malachi Corley could easily get playing time. Xavier Gibson too, for that matter, but Malachi Corley, I think, will get in the field. Maybe not a lot earlier, like I said, but earlier than most of us are thinking. So that's my thinking and logic there. 3, Buffalo Bills. I don't want to say this is controversial, but like people, I think, kind of are slamming the Bills wide receiver room. Maybe rightfully so because Stephon Diggs is gone, but maybe not rightfully so because I like how they have a lot of diverse skill sets. I'm going to give it 3.25, slightly above average. Obviously, I said in the very beginning of this episode, going through the numbers 1 to 5, 3 is perfectly middle of the road, middling at perfectly average at a 3. So 3.25 because the receiving room consists of Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, Matt Collins, MVS, Marcus Villa-Scantling, and Chase Claypool as a wide receiver 6. He's getting a lot of buzz right now, so I guess I'll include him in there as much as I don't like it. But I like Keon Coleman. He's that true vertical X receiver that we were missing. And then Curtis Samuel is a guy that can line up in the slot, line up on the outside, get vertical downfield as a downfield threat. Great run after catch. I wouldn't say he's a route technician like Stephon Diggs was for us, but like he's a very good route runner off his route stems, off the top of his routes and release off the line, what have you. And then Khalil Shakir, he's probably going to be your main slot receiver, and I really, really like him to explode in year 3. Is his archetype a type of guy that can get over 1,000, maybe even push 1,200 yards? No, but I think he could fit to 800, 900, maybe a little more of a ballpark at 800 to 900 yards. Yeah, I was saying this in the beginning and kind of teased it with Josh Allen. People say Josh Allen will regress is kind of stupid to me because maybe, yeah, his numbers might not have 4,500 yards like he's been hovering around, but 4,300 yards. Sure, why not? I think this receiving room is really underrated, so I'm going to give it a 3.25, but obviously we'll have a lot of conversations about it, this being a Bills podcast around the slice since the season coming up. And then I'm going to give this is kind of a theme, like the Patriots, their roster is really bad, other than the future of Drake May, and their defense is very good. Their offense just is not up to par with the rest of the division, as you'll see in the final offensive roster grades at the end of this episode video here. Patriots, wide receiver room, I'm giving it a 2.25. KJ Osborne, that was their quote-unquote marquee signing. He's a wide receiver 3. That's what he was in Minnesota. I like the potential of Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, but we haven't seen him play that. And then Kendrick Bourne coming off a torn ACL, low athleticism to begin with. So, and then Demario Douglas, Pop Douglas, I really like last year, but what is he, a wide receiver 4? And then you have this mix of Juju Smith-Schuster, Tyquan Thornton, Jalen Reagor, and for return specialist, Kayshon Boutte, who keeps getting arrested and off the field, he's going to be cut. I don't know why I even include him in here. Tyquan Thornton and Juju, one of them is going to be traded. They could even be a surprise cut, but I would think Tyquan Thornton has more value because he's younger and at least had very seldom minimal flashes, but at least like 2 or 3 flashes here and there. One of them is going to be traded between Juju and Tyquan Thornton, or maybe even both. I wouldn't be surprised. But again, I really like the potential of Jalen Polk and Javon Baker. And then KJ Osborne is your marquee signing as a wide receiver 3. Now he's going to be relying on as being wide receiver 1. I just don't like the makeup of this room. Like, everyone's going to have to play up a level, and they don't really have that wide receiver 1. At least the Bills have a quote unquote wide receiver 1 in Dalton Kincaid, even though it's technically a tight end, but he's really a big slot, chest piece, move around. Think of Travis Kelce. Think of Brock Bowers, even though he's not. The talent level of those guys, you hopefully get what I mean, the receiving pedigree. So I'm going to give this a 2.25. It's just easily the worst. It's not a good situation, guys. And then tight end, Bills, perfect 5. Other than quarterback, this is the Bills' only other perfect 5 in the whole list. Sorry, I lost it for a minute again. This is the only other perfect 5 in the whole list because the Bills have Dalton Kincaid, who I just said is a nice chess piece. He is going to be, even though he's technically a tight end, he is going to be the Bills wide receiver 1 this season. And then Dawson Knox, he's not some amazing blocker, but he's a really good blocker, especially in the run game. And they want to seal off those edges with Dawson Knox. That's why, as much as I'm not a biggest fan of the 2 tight end sets, that's why he's getting in the field so much with those 2 tight end sets, because he's a much better blocker. Unfortunately, it's just a matter of the fact that he's a much better blocker than Dalton Kincaid. So, and then Quentin Morris is very serviceable tight end 3 in this offense. I think for some teams, not a lot of teams, but some teams, he could be some teams wide receiver 2, or some teams tight end 2, second tight end, very serviceable tight end 2 in this league. He just happens to be our tight end 3. 2, New York Jets, 3.25. I'm just going to say it now. I have the Jets at 2, Patriots at 3, 4, Dolphins at 4. Don't look at the 2, 3, 4 numbers because they're all at a 3.25. I view all these the same. They all have a decent enough veteran at the top as their tight end 1, and then they all have decent enough mediocre depth at best behind them. The Jets have Tyler Conklin, Jeremy Rucker, Zach Kuntz, and Kenny Yeboah. The Patriots have Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper, Mitchell Wilcox, and Jaheim Bell, which, by the way, out of Florida State, rookie. I'm interested to see how they deploy him. And then 4, the Dolphins have Jonnu Smith, Durham Smythe, Jody Fortson, and Julian Hill. So I not really like any of these. They're all 3.25 for a reason, but slightly above average veterans with mediocre, maybe below average, but mediocre at best depth. But Jonnu Smith is easily the one I like the most for what it's worth. But I rate all those the same, 3.25. They're all kind of tied. And then offensive line. This is the 5th of the last group. I know this episode kind of gone on, but I want to get through this. Offensive line. I'm going to give the Bills a 4. If Mitch Morse was still here and David Edwards stayed on the bench and they didn't have to reshuffle the interior of their offensive line with David Edwards coming up from the bench to a starting left guard and Connor McGovern going from left guard to center, I'm pretty sure this would be a 5. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But they don't have Mitch Morse. So I'm going to, with all of these offensive lines, I'm going to do your starters from left to right and then your top 2 backups. So at left tackle, Bills, Deion Dawkins. At left guard, David Edwards. At center, Connor McGovern. At right guard, Cyrus Torrens. At right tackle, Spencer Brown. At center, Cedric Van Pran-Granger. Guys, a lot of SEC football in that guy's blood. Lots of experience at Georgia. I said this right after the draft, and I came in this podcast and said Cedric Van that's a mouthful to say. Cedric Van Pran-Granger is my, not by much, but he's my favorite pick of the entire draft for the Bills, maybe even above Keon Coleman. And I'm not be surprised if at some point this season, or maybe even week 1, he pushes Connor McGovern out and Connor McGovern goes back to left guard and David Edwards goes back to bench. And then tackle A.L. Collins, who has been struggling in voluntary OTAs and mandatory minicamp, so he had kind of a rough spring. But because of the Bills' lack of tackle depth, I think he'll make the roster still because of that. But I'm going to give it a 4. I really like Deion Dawkins. And David Edwards I really like as a starting left guard, but he hasn't started since 2022. So he hasn't consistently started games for any team in 2 years, since 2022, like I just said, with the Rams. And then Connor McGovern, I don't like the reshuffling this interior. Cyrus Torrence, I'm looking at as a 5 to 10 year starting guard, franchise cornerstone. And then right tackle, Spencer Brown. If he has another, I'm not going to ready to call him a franchise tackle yet, but if he has a second year in a row, another year like last year, he's going to get paid. Probably by the Bills, but maybe he gets outpriced, just like the Tremaine Edmonds situation, and he walks. We get a comp pick for him, hopefully. But I'm going to call him a franchise tackle if he has another stellar year like he did last year, even improves just a little bit. So I'm going to give this group a 4 just because I don't like the reshuffling of the left guard center situation. Everything else is pretty good, though. 2, Jets. I'm giving this a 3.75. This is easily the best offensive line they've had over the last, 5 or 6 years, over the last handful of years. At left tackle, you got Tyron Smith, who will miss games, unfortunately. Left guard, John Simpson. Center, Joe Tippmann. Right guard, Elijah Vera Tucker. Right tackle, Morgan Moses. And your depth is tackle, Olu Fashanu. And guard/tackle versatility guy with versatility across the offensive line, Max Mitchell, third-year player. I really like, the more I think about the Olu Fashanu pick, I really like it because Tyron Smith is going to get dinged up. What is he, 34 years old, coming over from the Cowboys? I was shocked they didn't re-sign with the Cowboys and they moved on so quickly. But, yeah, easily the best offensive line they've had in a handful of years. And I really like Joe Tippmann at center. And then Elijah Vera Tucker is interesting. When he's on the field, he's really very, very good. He could be like a top 10 guard, one of the best guards in the league, but when is he ever in the field? He's been in the league. He's going into year 4. So he's played 3 years in the league right now. And I think every single year he's had a torn ACL or a torn Achilles or some major knee injury or foot injury with the Achilles, I should say, rather. Point is, he's had some major injury all 3 years. Hopefully he can avoid that this year. And I don't blame them for declining his 5th-year option. But if he bounces back in a huge way this year, he's on track, I should say, rather, for an extension. 3, New England Patriots, 3.5 I'm giving them because this offensive line is slightly above average. Left tackle, Chooks, Okorafor. There's a reason he was cut by the Steelers. He was pretty mediocre for them at best, below average most of the time. And then left guard, Cole Strange, who by all reports will miss the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season. But let's just say he does somehow make the season. Center, David Andrews. Right guard, Sidy Sow. Right tackle, Mike Onwenu, who's equally as good at guard, maybe even best at right tackle, obviously. Then tackle, Caden Wallace. And guard, Antonio Mafi. Then they have a slew of other guys. I kind of like this offensive line. Like, the mix of veterans, like you got your veterans and David Andrews and franchise cornerstone veteran Mike Onwenu, and then you got some good young guy in Cole Strange and Sidy Sow, and then Chooks Okorafor is these are your worst ones. I'm gonna give this Patriots offensive line 3.5, maybe above, slightly above average. We'll just say above average. 4, Miami Dolphins. I'm giving this a 2.5. This might sound harsh, but this is not a good situation the more and more I think about it. Left tackle is Teron Armstead. He's a guy that's not going to practice during the week most weeks because he's just going to go out there on game day. He's going to get nicked up all the time. He's going to play through injury all the time. Then left guard is a Win, who hasn't started since really his Patriots days in like 2 or 3 years at this point. And center, Aaron Brewer. He's really athletic, but that's about it. He's an okay blocker. He doesn't have any power to him, so he gets pancaked a lot. And then right guard, Robert Jones, who's really only been a reserve offensive lineman, coming in and spot starting here and there for different guys. Right tackle, Austin Jackson. I think he's the one. He kind of Spencer Brown is kind of on the same trajectory as him. First 2 years in the league, Austin Jackson was kind of a disaster, just like Spencer Brown. Then his third year in the league, he really put it all together. They rewarded him with a $10 million per year contract, and then he settled in nicely. I think Spencer Brown could do the same thing. But I give this a 2, and then your reserves are, I have 3 reserves for them because they're kind of all really good in my opinion. Patrick Paul and Kendall Lamb as tackles. Center, Liam Eichenberg, like Notre Dame. I love my Fighting Irish players in the league, but like he's not a good player. Like he started a tackle, disaster there. Then he went to guard, disaster there. Then he went to center, disaster there. He really fits in nowhere. He's best reserved as a 6th or 7th offensive lineman off the bench. But I'm giving this a 2.5 because Teron Armstead, like, when is he ever fully healthy? Never. And then the interior of this offensive line, it's just not going to come together, in my opinion, with Isaiah Wynn at left guard, who's been few years since he started, been a full-time starter. Center, Aaron Brewer, who got no power to him, but very athletic, but that's about it. Right guard, Robert Jones, who's been a reserve in his career, I should say, rather, the Dolphins. And then Austin Jackson is the one I like. But yeah, this interior is not good. Like Austin Jackson's really the only one I can trust at this point. Even Trent Armstead gets injured all the time. So I'm giving this a 2.5. Okay, finally, this is going to be fun. AFC East offensive roster grades for 2024. Going into the season, I added it all up. This is how all 4 teams stack up against each other. There's 5 categories, right? Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and offensive line. Guard, center, tackle. We're all including it. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and offensive line. And you can get a 5. 5 times 5, I'll walk you through. 5 times 5 is 25. So out of a possible 25, these are the roster grades. The Bills are at number 1 with a 20.75. So they're still a really good roster. Maybe not like an elite roster with tons of depth like in years past, but they're at a 20.75. The Jets, though, are a close second. I didn't realize they were going to be as close at 19. And the Dolphins at 3 was 17.75. I think the Dolphins have more star power, but I don't think they have the depth that the Bills and Jets do. And then the 4 Patriots, it's a big gap. 15.25 out of a possible 25. So I'll just reiterate that again. Bills, 20.75. Jets, 19. Dolphins, 17.75. Patriots, 15.25. So that's how the Patriots, obviously worse. That's how, because almost all the categories at the bottom, unfortunately, their roster isn't good, guys, other than their defense and QB for the future of Drake May. Anyway, with all that out of the way, I hope you enjoyed that episode. That's stacking up the teams. We went through everything, rated them on a scale 1 to 5. We'll do the same exact thing for the defense next week, and I'll give you the defensive grades, and I'll give you the overall roster grades out of a possible 50 in a couple weeks. So anyways, guys, I almost forgot some plugs. You can make sure to tune into Around the Slice, newly launched Around the Slice podcast network with weekly shows for this show, the Around the Slice, and the Bill show, obviously, and then the Around the Slice Fantasy Football show. You can listen to both shows on an app with the Around the Slice podcast network on YouTube, or watch YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcast. We're on multiple platforms at this point. And then you can follow me personally on Twitter at aweiner13, and you can follow the show on Twitter at Around Slice. Not the, but at Around Slice. And then lastly, if you want to support me on Patreon for $3 a month, you get extra exclusive bonus content not found in this podcast. If you want to hear more of my thoughts, I'll be ramping that up in the coming weeks and months over the summer as we get closer to the season. I cannot wait. Again, for just $3 a month. That's bonus content at patreon.com/aroundtheslates. Thank you for tuning in today. This was a really, really fun exercise, and we'll be back on the defensive side for all 4 teams next week. Bye.